Hey, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. You are watching DeProgram. I'm Ted Rall. John Kiriakou is here with me,
Welcome back.
usual, as always. Yep. And it is Wednesday, May 28th, 2025. And we have a lot to talk about, a lot of news, some of it stranger, all of it kind of weird, actually. But anyway, we should probably just dive right into it. So I'm going to sort of list what we're going to be talking about. First, we're going to start out with Elon Musk and pretty much the end of his tenure at DOGE, or well, pretty much the end. Then we're going to move on to the state of the talks between U.S. and Iran over Iran's nuclear program. This fatal fiasco in Gaza, some organization, Israeli U.S. front organization called the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. We'll get into the details. Will there be more sanctions against Russia, or might we be moving closer to peace between Russia and Ukraine? And finally, Trump decided to shit can a bunch of respected military historians. So stay tuned. We're going to get to all that within just an hour or so. So, we're the best value in news. All right, here we go. Let's get into it. John, you wanted to talk about Elon Musk.
Yeah. I wanted to talk about Elon Musk for a couple of reasons. First of all, he has physically left Washington and he has gone back to California. He'll end up going to Texas because that's where he's moving his many companies. They're all going to South Texas. But he's gone, physically gone from Washington. And people are very happy about that. First of all, DOGE has disrupted the lives of many, many government employees. We have this thing called the Civil Service Act in the United States that the federal workforce can't be politicized. They also have some protections, and Elon Musk just didn't respect those protections. A lot of that's going to be hashed out in court. But one of the things that was very interesting to me, well, there were a couple of things that were very interesting to me today. One was a kerfuffle at the Department of the Interior. Now, it's rare that we see news from the Department of the Interior. Specifically, this is from the Bureau of Land Management. Okay, Donald Trump has said, drill, baby, drill. And so a lot of these federal lands out west are going to be used for drilling. Okay, we can all have that debate whenever we want. But what's interesting to me is that the deputy director of the Bureau of Land Management was fired today, fired from the federal government. He was escorted out of the building by security and his badge was taken away from him. Why? Because the woman who is the DOGE representative for the Department of Interior sent a memo yesterday in which she told DOI employees they have to do this, that, and the other thing. And this guy told them, just ignore that because DOGE, there is no such thing as DOGE, and Musk is gone, and so we're going to go right back to work like we always were. Well, it turns out that the woman who was the DOGE official covering the Department of the Interior is now the chief of HR for the Department of the Interior.
Oh,
and so she said, "No,
HR get to get rid of the boss."
No,
Okay.
Can do.
Just checking.
Civil Service Act, you can't do it, but they did it anyway. And so again, this is all going to be hashed out in court.
What would happen if you handcuffed yourself to your desk and refused to leave? I mean, I'm not kind of kidding. This isn't as you know, this is not the first department where this exact scenario has played out. DOGE told federal employees to do this and that. The boss says you can ignore it, then the boss gets canned or threatened with being canned. But there is kind of no government entity called DOGE.
No, really, there isn't.
Right? I mean, Congress has to create it.
Congress has to create it. Now, there's this little loophole where Barack Obama, near the end of his second term, created this quasi-governmental entity and got away with it. The Supreme Court said, yeah, you can do that. But it wasn't like DOGE, which is supposed to be this overarching boss of all federal employees. That's quite different. And that's why DOGE has been so unsuccessful in the courts so far.
Right. Well,
now,
I mean, And so basically, this is more about like de facto. Like
Yeah,
it's Silicon Valley. Move fast and break things.
that's it.
And then government is the opposite of move fast, or break things. Right? Things last forever. They don't
Yes.
they don't move fast.
Yes.
So
The
basically, that's
system
what
is the system.
they can just operate outside of the law, figuring that by the time you catch up with the Roadrunner, he's out of town.
That's right.
And he's on, and your USAID or whatever has burned to the ground.
Well, Elon Musk said today in an interview with a conservative outlet that he was surprised at how difficult it was going to be to work with the federal government. He knew the government was big. He knew it was entrenched. He didn't realize it was that big and that entrenched.
What?
Yeah.
I mean, he lives in the United States, right? I mean, hello.
Yeah, but remember, the guy's originally South African. He came here as an adult and had pretty much everything handed to him. I mean, he's worth $444 billion, but not really.
No, not really. Not if you settled everything. I always say, as a former banker, you're worth your assets minus your liabilities. That's what you're worth.
It's as simple as that. It's as simple as that.
He has access to credit, is what he has.
That's what it is.
I mean, as a business person, though, he has dealt with the federal government and agencies, regulators, on the federal and state and even local level for years.
Yeah.
I mean, he knows about bureaucracy, paperwork.
You would think.
Overlaying, right? I mean, it's so entrenched. I mean,
well, both the Washington Post.
Is he really telling the truth here, or is he just bullshitting?
I think he's making an excuse for his own failure. I think that's what it comes down to.
He never stood a chance, honestly.
No way. You can't just walk into the room and start throwing grenades. You got to work with Congress. And when you control the White House and both houses of Congress, then there's a way to get that kind of, program done. But you can't just go in and say, I'm the new sheriff in town and this is the way it's going to be. People are going to laugh at you. Yeah. Especially when you start off the conversation by saying, I'm only going to be in town for 6 months, then I'm going to leave.
Right. That's also an interesting, I wanted to ask you about that, John. I find it like peculiar the way that the media is reporting this. They're like, oh my God, he's leaving. He said he was going to leave. And he was leaving now. He said, I'll be gone. I'll be there no more than 6 months, maybe a little less. Here he is, 6 months, a little less. He's gone.
He's gone. Where's
the story here?
I was reading the London Standard today, which it's a free newspaper that comes out in the afternoon in London. When I lived there back in the 80s, I loved it because I was just a poor student and it was free. And, the guy would hand me the Standard every day. So I was looking at the Standard online and they said the most interesting thing. And I think this is really what it comes down to. Sales of Teslas in the United States are off 35%. Sales of Teslas in the European Union are off 46%. Wow. We are talking about billions and billions of dollars that this has cost Elon Musk. People don't like him, John, and they're boycotting his car.
I'm so counterintuitive. This makes me want to go to my Tesla dealership right away and be like, will you take $15,000 for a Tesla right now?
Yes, that's exactly right. That's exactly right. And this piece in the Standard said that in the United States, we ban these Chinese electric cars, BYD. I think I mentioned them last week, Beyond Your Dreams. These are gorgeous cars, and they cost a fraction of what a Tesla costs. And so I think that people love the idea of an electric car. They hate the idea of Elon Musk. And there's an easy, get around. Go with the BYD.
So that is fascinating. I mean, so obviously, look, Elon's been in trouble with his board in the past. We all remember that incident where, I think it was pre-pandemic, where he went on Rogan and he was smoking weed on the air. Mm-hmm. And then the board was displeased, shockingly. Everyone always thinks the CEO is the boss, but Steve Jobs could tell you the CEO or the president isn't really the boss. The board is the boss.
That's right.
And they were pissed. and they threatened to fire Elon. He almost got fired. I think they put him on like double secret probation.
Yeah.
And now I think he's in the same position, right? I mean, the share price is down 50%.
50%.
I mean, that's catastrophic. A lot of corporations couldn't survive that kind of drop.
That's
I mean,
right.
Now the counterfactual is Tesla's got something no one else has got. They have the charging infrastructure all over the United States and around the world that nobody else has got. And it's exclusive, it's proprietary. I mean, I wouldn't count them out.
Yeah, I have to agree. One other thing, Tesla's, what's it called? SpaceX?
SpaceX.
They launched a rocket today.
Yep. And
it had what they called an unscheduled, catastrophic disassembly. That was the phrase that they used. An unscheduled catastrophic disassembly.
An explosion.
Yeah, it blew up.
Yeah.
It blew up. Again. It's like every other rocket he sends up blows up.
Although, in fairness, I mean, space is hard. Rocketry is hard. The early days of the U.S., I mean, not even the early days, the mid days. I mean, we lost a couple of space shuttles. The Soviets and us, we lost guys on the launch pad. Mm-hmm. I mean, rocketry is hard.
It's dangerous. Yep.
I like the way that I do have to say, I like the way that SpaceX handled it today, where they said, this was good. We learned a lesson. Now we will know not to. I mean, I'm a former engineering student. My father is a very well-regarded aeronautical engineer. By some accounts, I looked him up. It was pretty impressive. Some people call him the father of the modern Air Force.
Your dad?
My dad. Mm-hmm. Yeah, Fred Rall.
That's amazing.
Yeah, because he revolutionized. Yeah, it's pretty cool. There's oral histories about. Anyway, you can find stuff about him online. Anyway, the point is, he's still around. He's 96 years old, going strong.
God bless him.
Kicking ass and taking names. But anyway, and still smart. Totally with it. Not like Joe Biden. He would have admired that. I mean, you're just making mistakes, and you have to make mistakes in order to learn.
Yes.
I will say, generically, I don't know how you feel about this, John. I don't like the privatization of space
at all.
I think it's a mistake. I think not only is it like, I think there's too much deregulation around it. I think it should be a government program. And also I think back to, I grew up with like Apollo Soyuz. I like the idea of international cooperation where all the countries get together and work together. And space is like a thing that we all do together as a planet rather than as a bunch of private corporations. I don't like it.
When I was at the CIA, I was a young junior analyst. This is like 1991 or 92. A bunch of us did something like a field trip to a launch site on the eastern shore of Virginia. There's an area in Southern Virginia called, this is the actual name, it's called Big Assawoman. And there's a Big Assawoman Bay, Little Assawoman Bay, and they've got a launch site there. It's ostensibly a NASA site, and they launch a lot of satellites from that area. So we went down to watch a launch, and I was shocked at how many Russians were there to watch the launch. And I said something to one of the scientists, and he said, "Oh, this is an unclassified facility. It's an international space launch facility." He said, "It would be unusual for us to not have foreign collaborators or guests here." And I remember thinking, what a great idea that is. That's the way it should be. That's the way space should be. We should be helping each other.
Yeah.
And we
may end up with, seriously, I know I've watched a lot of 80s and 90s disaster movies, but we really might face some kind of challenge from space, like an asteroid or something else.
Oh, yeah.
That really requires trillions of dollars and all of the world's attention to focus on this issue. Mm-hmm. I thought about this 2 summers ago. I drove across with my son, Labrador, and northern Quebec. And I noticed on the map there's this one lake that's a perfect circle in northern Quebec, giant perfect circle. And we stayed at this research facility that's like right on the banks of this lake. Anyway, I looked it up, and it's the site of an ancient asteroid strike, a big one that like probably caused a partial mass extinction like tens of millions of years ago. And, it's just a reminder, we do get hit by shit sometimes, and we're sort of just counting like, well, we've only been around less than 1 million years as a species, so maybe we'll slip in and slip out between them. But I think that's kind of the subtext. But, that's not reasonable to count on.
Yeah. One time I was driving down Interstate 95 with my wife, also back in the 90s, going to visit a friend of mine, and we saw this streaking thing in the air with a glowing green tail. And I said, hey, look at that. It looks like a meteorite. And we watched it until, it's sort of, we couldn't see it anymore. It was in the Washington Post the next day. It was a meteorite. It was visible from New Jersey to Kentucky. That's how high it was and how quickly it was coming in. And
it was. That's
what the article was about. It was about how we get hit by things every once in a while. And every, less often once in a while, those things are big enough to kill a whole bunch of living creatures.
Yeah. No, I mean, I was on the Karakoram Highway on a bus between Pakistan and Western China. And same sort of thing, looking out the window, and I saw a meteor streak across the sky. And I guess it was probably very small by, these standards, but still, it struck the earth. We saw it like, strike the earth like a few miles away, and left a trail of fire.
Yeah.
It was, I mean, things are, we're not, space isn't empty. There's a lot of rocks, a lot of debris, space junk. It's something we need to be thinking about for sure.
Yep.
So I think Musk got out of town just in time, right? I mean, kind of.
Yeah. Good riddance to him. I'm glad he's gone. I don't like him. I don't respect him. He didn't know what he was doing. Yeah, I'm glad he's out.
Well, let's see. Let's hope that people who are conducting the talks between Iran and the United States know what they're doing. I don't know if Donald Trump knows what he's doing. There are so many mixed messages coming out of these talks, ranging from this is a total catastrophe and failure to, where we're at the brink of war, where Trump says, no, actually, we might have a breakthrough here. I don't know what to think.
The messages coming from the U.S. side and the Iranian side almost never match, which is just nuts to me. Because usually they're variations of each other, Like one will say things went well, and the other will say things, weren't terrible. Or we made some progress.
Or they usually, I think they coordinate and usually say like, these were constructive talks.
That's right.
Right. Let's just say this was constructive, or we agreed on next steps or whatever.
Yes. And that's not what we're saying. What we saw today was a statement from Donald Trump saying that when Benjamin Netanyahu was last in the country, he specifically asked that the United States attack Iran. Bomb Iran is what he said. Now, I'm 100% sure that that's true, because as I've said many times, through all the presidents that I worked for in federal service, literally every single time the Israeli prime minister, whoever he happened to be, but in most cases it's Benjamin Netanyahu, would come to the United States, they would always ask us to bomb the Iranians. Every time. And presidents have held off. I'm not entirely sure Donald Trump can hold off. What did you say?
Israelis are capable of bombing Iran themselves. Really? Why don't they do it?
Because they know that they're going to get their asses kicked in response. But if the United States goes in on the Israeli side and we both bomb Iran, there's a better chance of a preemptive strike that could just knock the Iranians out before they get started. It's one of the stupidest things I think any government could possibly do.
We're not going to do that.
No, we're not going to do it. Although Trump said that he's willing to consider it. He said again today, besides this statement about Netanyahu, he said that Joseph, is the American Enterprise Institute still around? Amen, right? It's like this whole policy is coming straight from them. They've wanted to bomb Iran since, the invention of bombs. So Trump said it was something that was disturbing. Not that Netanyahu asked for this. That's not even really news. It's that if these talks don't fail, we'll bomb Iran. It's like, wait a minute, cowboy. Nobody's made that determination yet. And you can't just bomb a country because you don't like its politics, although we certainly do with
we
frequency.
sure can. But
Yeah.
I mean, but Iran, the thing is, like I always like to say, Iran is not Afghanistan under the Taliban.
Exactly.
It's a real country.
And
It has
keeping in mind that the
real-
Taliban actually beat us.
well, there's that too, right?
Yeah.
It's a real country. They can defend themselves. They have a real military.
That's right.
They have actual infrastructure.
Yeah.
It's, you
What
go
do they
there,
have?
basically
80 million
Europe.
people? 80, 100 million people, something like that?
It's big.
It's a real country. Yeah.
Yeah.
And, I have a lot of friends in Iran, and I speak to them regularly all the time. And they say the same thing, that the Iranian people are ready for a fight. It's the Iranian government that is holding them back. And so we need to take advantage of a mood in Tehran that government is open to negotiation. So we need to take these talks very seriously. And I'm not sure that the White House is. I think the negotiators appear to be. But I'm not sure that the White House is. I'm worried
this
about
White House. It's an ADHD White House, and it's an ADHD president. And it's like his attention is scattered, right? I mean, he's worried about there's the economy, there's immigration, there's Gaza, and this is all tied into Gaza. I mean, the Israelis are kind of like the fishmonger's wife, right? They're always asking for more. They're never satisfied. It's like, we want the capital in Jerusalem. We want to fuck up the West Bank. Now we want to completely ethnically cleanse Gaza.
Yes.
And it goes on and on. Please bomb Iran. Like, what's next? You want to be Lord God of all creation? I mean, it's like, what do you want? Like, stop. At a certain point, I mean, Donald Trump doesn't strike me as the kind of man who responds well to constant demands. He's like, I'm the guy who makes demands. I'm not the guy. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And if out of his benevolence, he decides to grant a favor, this is his personality, then he expects appropriate gratitude, which somehow I'm going to guess Bibi Netanyahu isn't that good at showing.
Yeah, I think that's right. Also, one interesting thing to watch is how Donald Trump, looking at the last 3 or 4 weeks, Donald Trump has remained ardently Zionist, but not necessarily pro-Netanyahu. And I find that to be a little bit more sophisticated than I expected from Donald Trump, where you can be blindly Zionist, but not really show respect for the guy who's running Israel. It's interesting to me.
Well, I mean, he's, the kind of business that Trump is used to is very personality based. I mean, banking and real estate. And it's all about these one-on-one relationships and sizing people up and their mettle. And I'm not saying he disrespects Bibi Netanyahu, but, in that whole Zelensky exchange when he said, you don't hold the cards, I think right there is like a real window into Donald Trump's thinking. If you don't have the standing to be making a big ask, then, and if I can see through it and I see you're bluffing, I'm going to fuck you.
Yes.
And I think that he's just, I'm not saying he's ready to fuck Israel, but I mean, he's also very public opinion driven. And, Israel's stock is falling faster than Tesla's. It is really not doing well in the polls at all.
That is right.
We're going to talk, we can talk a little bit about what just happened in Gaza, but I think I just don't see, let's put it this way. There is no appetite in MAGA world or anywhere else in the United States for a military strike against Iran. None.
Yes.
people, and I think
Yes.
sort of subconsciously, Iran's in the back, is in the rear view mirror. It's like this is like something we haven't had to think about since 1981, and like really we don't want to think about it anymore. And also for people who know, they're like, yeah, Iran's kind of a big country that could hurt us. Like you said, we already got our asses kicked in Afghanistan and in Iraq. You know, we lose our war. We lose.
We do because we don't know when to leave. Number one, and number two, there's never an exit strategy. It's painful.
Yeah.
We saw it in Iraq. We saw it in Afghanistan. We're probably going to end up seeing it in the Sahel or Somalia. We just don't know when to leave.
No.
Yeah.
And I think the optics, we don't understand the optics of how we look to other countries. But I think Donald Trump has a better sense than maybe some of his predecessors for how this Israel thing looks. And he gets it. I mean, we've seen it. We've seen through, we've had little hints of this over the years, really, even before the campaign. Do we want to talk about this Gaza situation? I mean, this is the New York Times broke the news a few days ago that basically the same lovely people who brought us Project 2025 ginned up this thing called the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, which is a joint U.S.-Israeli venture masquerading as a genuine NGO. Yeah. Basically, the messaging here has been from Israel largely. The UN and the other traditional NGOs like MSF, which is Doctors Without Borders, their French acronym, and so on. They don't really know what they're doing. When they distribute food in Gaza, it gets all taken by Hamas, and that's the real problem. We want the food we don't want the people of Gaza to starve. It's not our fault. It's evil Hamas who's taking all of the food, even though there's all the reporting really doesn't indicate that that's true at all. There's been, to the extent that food's been stolen inside the Strip, it's been stolen with the cooperation of the IDF, who basically gave it to the local ruffians, who were not Hamas, by the way. Hamas was like trying to fight them. These are just local, like basically mafia gangs. But basically the Strip's been cut off from food for the better part of 60 days. People are starving to death. Kids are starving to death. So the Israelis realize they have to do something. And this is kind of this incredibly cynical operation, right? The Gaza Humanitarian Foundation basically says, okay, you all have to move down to these little safety strips by the southern border with Egypt, where then you're going to be free to leave. They're now saying the quiet part out loud, so the ethnic cleansing part. But in the meantime, you can get some food, but you've got to submit to biometric scanning, eyes, fingerprints, everything. So we know everything about everybody. You can come get some food, but we're going to basically geotag you, and we're going to know everything about your ass. And we're going to only give the food to the people we like. Anyway, they decided to do this yesterday for the first time. The good news is people showed up. The bad news is thousands of people showed up because so many people are starving to death. And there was a panic, there was a rush, and probably the Israelis weren't very good at crowd management. Apparently there were no ID checks. It was like a shit show. Right. And at some point the Israelis panicked and they fired into the crowd. And even though there's mixed reports, but basically there's credible reporting from NPR and others that people were killed, some people were injured. The Israelis claim they fired in the air, but not really, right? They fired some of the bullets, at least shots were fired into the crowd, small arms. This is really bad, right? I mean, to me, it really does feel like the beginning of the end of something. I don't know if this leads to finally the world growing a pair and putting a stop to all this, or does it, because we already have the UK, the French, and the Brits, and the Germans are pissed off and have threatened the Israelis. We don't know with what, but we don't know if that, or if this is where Israel finally gets their way and they kick everyone out of Gaza, although I don't know where they go. Right.
Where would they go? The Jordanians have said, oh, no, you don't. And the Egyptians said, absolutely not. So, yeah, where would they go?
I mean, there was talk. They put up a berm, right? They put up
a berm. That's right. Exactly. And there was talk about sending all the Palestinians to some island in Indonesia. There was talk about sending them to Iceland. That was another thing. It's just, I mean, listen, all that stuff meets the legal definition of a genocide. It's ethnic cleansing. You can't do it. But the Israelis don't care about that. And most of the time, the Americans don't care about that either.
Lulu, our viewer from YouTube, is asking, what about the American mercenaries on the ground? Important question, right? So I don't know if we're talking about like former Blackwater, or now they're called Z, right?
Yeah, Z.
Or another company, but private soldiers are on the ground bringing peace and love to Gaza, making a great impression on everyone as usual. These are the same people who massacred Iraqis in that square in Baghdad. That was the subject of the famous video that was leaked by Chelsea Manning.
That's right.
I mean, this just seems like it's a level of new. I don't know if it's escalation, but it just seems like it does seem like the beginning of the end of something, like of this phase of the war.
Yeah, I have to agree. I have to agree. And, I'm wondering too, when I first saw these reports about mercenaries, it made me think, are the Israelis doing this just because they can afford it? Or are they doing it because young Israeli men and women who are being drafted or who are eligible to be drafted are refusing to fight? You see this reporting in Haaretz or in the Jerusalem Post as recently as about a week ago, saying that the Israelis are having real problems drafting young people to go fight in Gaza. They don't want to go fight in Gaza. And I'm wondering if this is supposed to fill that gap.
I guess it is. And I'm also kind of wondering if this, fake NGO, right? This front organization that they've created. I wonder if this is going to be this is a way to sort of get the witnesses out of the way for what's coming.
It could be. It could be.
I mean, because the plan here, I'm not making up any conspiracy here. The Israelis say their plan is now to push everyone into a tiny strip, all 2 million people who haven't been killed yet, along the border with Egypt, and then they will be free to leave from there. That's the verbiage. I don't know, free to leave where, as you say, but but that's the plan. So that would involve violence, right? I mean, these people in Gaza are deeply committed to resistance and to keeping their homes, so deeply that when they had the chance to go back to just the ruined site of their bombed out buildings, they did by the hundreds of thousands.
Yes.
So these are not people who are going to go peacefully. They don't. It's not like whatever, fuck it, I'm out of here, off to Toronto. Yeah. It's not that they can go to Toronto, but they don't want to go to Toronto.
No, they don't.
These are Palestinians. That's Palestine.
These families have been there 2,000 plus years.
Right.
Why would they want to go somewhere else?
They would. Right. Nor should they. Nor should they have to. So, I guess, and you and I have asked this question before, and we've always agreed, like, the world will not allow this to happen. This will be, I still think that's right. But it's going to be like East Timor. It's going to be ugly, and more people are going to die at a even faster rate than they have so far. I hate to say that. I really just think that's what's going to happen.
Yes, indeed. I agree, and I think that's still the case. And thank God that not the British, but the Germans et al. Are beginning to stand up. Like the Irish, they should take a lesson from the Irish. Little Ireland has an actual foreign policy that's independent of both the United States and the European Union. God bless them.
Yeah, no, that is good. But basically right now, the messaging out of these three Western European countries has been, this must stop or there will be trouble, as RoboCop would say. Okay, so what trouble? What's the trouble?
That
I mean,
movie.
Haaretz is interpreting this as, and some Israeli officials are saying, wow, some European countries might actually impose sanctions on Israel. I don't read it that way, but
No, I don't
maybe like reduced intelligence cooperation, reduced weapons shipments.
Yeah.
Maybe, I mean, two of these countries are permanent members of the Security Council, right?
Yes.
I mean,
yes.
they could veto. I mean, they could vote against Israel.
Yes.
On
and usually they don't. I mean, in a worst case scenario, they'll abstain. Usually they don't vote against Israel.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But the problem is that usually when those Security Council resolutions are proposed, they're proactive in tone, and so all it takes is a U.S. veto, and the whole thing is dead. And that's really what we see.
Well, we'll see there. I mean, Marie Leul says that the Germans we're wrong. The Germans are lying with Zionism.
She's right. Yeah, the Germans have this national sense of guilt for the Second World War that now they're Israel's bitches. I hate to say, but that's really what it is.
And of course, the history of Zionism is, of course, the Nazis were really into Zionism. Like, let's get all our Jews out of here. You guys all go down to the Holy Land, have a good time. They supported that.
Yeah, they did. Yes, they did.
So ironically,
hey, I've seen Exodus. I know what it's all about.
it's like hey, it's like ethnic cleansing. Huh? There's an idea. Very, very strange. Okay, so there's Russia, Ukraine.
Man,
I was optimistic. Looks like I was wrong.
I was too. Yep, I was just as wrong. Trump, Trump is like, let me back up. The Emir of Bahrain once said something in an unguarded moment when I was speaking with him at his beach house. He said that he hated King Hussein. He said, Hussein is like a flag. Wherever the wind is blowing, he goes like this. There's Hussein. And that's Donald Trump on so many issues. One of them being the Russia-Ukraine war. The Russians, not even the Russians, Putin simply has not done what Trump has told him to do. And Trump is so angry that he's begun lashing out by saying that Putin's disrespecting him, that he's going to be forced to supply new arms and weapon systems to the Ukrainians, despite the fact that he didn't want to, and that the war is going to continue on. I was talking to a contact of mine in Russia who's strongly pro-Putin, saying that Trump is a fool if he ever thought that Putin was going to take orders from him, and that the war will end when Putin wants it to end. Mm-hmm. And that's not going to be until the Russians are in the strongest possible position.
And that does appear to be the case. I wonder, I mean, look, I've read a lot about Putin. I've read the whole Philip Short biography. It's really worth reading. I think he's an impressive guy, but even impressive guys can make mistakes. I'm just wondering if Putin's kind of missing an opportunity here, maybe. It seems like he's not going to have in the United States, Trump is an unusually he's a non-anti-Russian figure, right? So he admires Putin. So I don't know if Russia's going to have a partner like Donald Trump in the future. I mean, maybe Vance would be if he gets the nod, but maybe not, right? So I just wonder if it's like, maybe this is like a time for we often talk about how, the United States doesn't understand our adversaries or our negotiating partners. But, it goes the other way sometimes too. And sometimes other countries don't really understand us famously, right? Like the Japanese really thought that we would take Pearl Harbor as sort of like a warning, like a swat on the nose, like that. We wouldn't go to war over that.
Yes.
We wouldn't care. Hawaii wasn't a state; it was just a colony out in the middle of nowhere. It's we would be like, okay, never mind, too much trouble.
Yeah.
They didn't understand American culture or politics. I mean, do you think that's what's going on here? I mean, that's kind of like what I'm leaning toward. I feel like, I mean, Russia's gotten most of what it came for, and maybe at this point, it's like you should bring it in for a landing.
I think I agree completely. Somebody told me just the other day that there was an interview in which Putin said that he preferred dealing with Donald Trump because Donald Trump gave him the things that he wanted, but that Trump was so unpredictable that dealing with Joe Biden was just simply easier. And I wonder if that's part of
with Joe Biden.
Yeah, right. Yeah. The cabal that was Joe Biden.
Right.
I'm wondering if that's the case here. The German chancellor said over the weekend, this past weekend, that Germany would no longer restrict how deep into Russian territory German drones and other systems could be used. That's a serious upgrade in the level of conflict, a serious upgrade. The US still has such restrictions, but if the Germans are going to lift those restrictions, and the Poles are, and the French likely are, that means this war is going to get a lot worse before it gets any better. And more innocent civilians on both sides are going to be affected.
I mean, this feels like Putin is kind of he's playing Henry Kissinger in 1971, 72, right?
You know what? I said the same thing a couple of days ago. Yes. You beat the shit out of the North Vietnamese so that you can negotiate a couple of months from now from the strongest possible position. Yes.
And I think it's a mistake. I think it was a mistake in 1972. I think it's a mistake now. I think the whole idea of like softening people up by bombing them, it doesn't work psychologically. I mean, there's really no basis. I think maybe Serbia, the Kosovo War, is the closest example to bombing a country into submission, but it almost never works otherwise, right? I mean, for the most part, it unifies that country behind the whatever the government is, because the government is fighting the people who are bombing you. Bombing's so indiscriminate. It just doesn't, you're not softening anyone up. If anything, you're hardening their resolve and you're pissing them off. I mean, ultimately, when you sit down to negotiate, the less anger you've provoked, the easier it's going to be to start, moving, because you're going to have to get along at some point. You're going to have to make agreements. You're going to have to trust each other.
That's right. You're going to have to. So I agree with you. I think this is a terrible policy on both sides. It's terrible.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting too, because Trump apparently really took issue with the Russians' refusal to go along with having the Vatican act as a neutral arbiter between Russia and Ukraine. But I'm like thinking, you do understand, right, that these are Orthodox countries, right, not Roman Catholic countries. I mean, it would like, while you're at it, why don't you bring in, bring in like the Dalai Lama to do it? That might work better. You might need someone completely from outside.
Yeah, and listen,
almost like tone deaf.
And as an Orthodox Christian, I can tell you that nobody outside Russia respects the Russian Orthodox Church, because the Russian Orthodox Church during Soviet times, they were all KGB agents, and in post-Soviet times, they're all saps working for the Kremlin. So yeah, that's
Well, the only thing that's earning them some respect is that they've been banned in Ukraine, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah.
So, all right. So,
Can I
don't
say
know.
Something real quick. We had a comment, Joseph. You're absolutely right. It's the Ukrainians that are taking 99% of these civilian casualties. It's like the Russians just arbitrarily attack civilian sites, apartment buildings, schools, hospitals. I get it. I'm just saying that at longer ranges, it's more difficult to control the end result in these attacks. And if we're going to be pro peace, we have to be pro peace on both sides. Ted,
absolutely.
I think when the war started, it was before you became a host on Sputnik. Is that right?
I guess that's right. Yeah, just before. Mm-hmm.
I remember going into work that day and telling our boss, Mindia Gavishelli, that we couldn't say anything positive about Russia. I said, we've got to be able to speak our minds. And it was actually a part of my contract that I negotiated, that I was allowed to speak freely. And I started the show that day by saying, I understand the accusations against the United States and the West from 2014, but I unreservedly condemn the Russian invasion of Ukraine, and I call on Russian troops to withdraw immediately. And nobody stopped me. Nobody interrupted me or tried to edit it out later. It ran. I'm sure I didn't make any friends at Sputnik Moscow, but they let it run. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, he had told me when I started, that if I wanted to criticize Putin, I could. It makes sense that they would have to have that. I mean, look, it's not like I've told the story about being recruited to audition at MSNBC. You can't criticize the Democratic Party.
Yeah, it's like,
that's a bigger ask than, frankly, a Russian channel telling you, hey, it'd be great if you didn't criticize our president. That really wouldn't be that unreasonable. But they didn't ask it.
They asked me, RT asked me for an interview one time when I was at Sputnik. It was when the Israelis did the operation with the pagers, remember? And they blew up half of Hezbollah. So I said, sure, I'll give you an interview. And the first question, they always ask loaded questions, of course. And so the first question was, isn't this a war crime to do something like this? And I said, yeah, it is. It's a war crime pretty clearly, because there's no thought given to civilian casualties. Do you think the people are going to be fired in Israel for this? And I was like, fired? No, this was a brilliant operation. It was like a stroke of genius.
If they're going to get medals.
Yeah, that's what I said. People are going to get medals and they're going to get promotions. Is it a war crime? You bet it's a war crime. But if your job is to kill as many of Hezbollah's leaders as possible, and you're the guy that came up with this idea to put explosives inside of all the leadership's pagers, oh my God, they're going to make you the head of Mossad after that.
Yeah.
It was brilliant. It was illegal, but it was brilliant.
It's like my take on this whole thing has been like, obviously the whole modern nation state system relies on respecting sovereign borders, and at a certain point just deciding, look, yes, borders have changed. You can look at historical maps and see countries have invaded each other, empires have expanded, they've collapsed. We know these borders change, but at a certain point, like after Metternich, we kind of decided we were going to try to stop doing that. And but that said, it's also true that the West and Ukraine provoked the war. That's true too.
Yeah.
By threatening to join NATO. I mean, it's like, and like I've always said, if the U.S. had, if the Warsaw Pact still existed and Mexico or Canada wanted to join them, I guarantee you we'd be in Ottawa or Mexico City in like 5 days.
Without a doubt. And I'll tell you another thing too, and I don't know why the media don't talk about this, but Belarus is a belligerent in this fight.
True.
The Belarusians allowed Russian troops to invade Ukraine through their own territory. That makes them a legitimate target of the Ukrainian military. But the Ukrainians have held off. Another belligerent in this is North Korea. It's one thing for mercenaries to go fight on one side or the other. That's going to happen in every war. But the North Koreans, as a country, as a government, committed troops, combat troops, to fight on the Russian side. That makes North Korea a belligerent in this, and it makes them sort of eligible for attack. Now, the Ukrainians don't have a reach to allow them to get to North Korea, but if they did, they could legally.
They could. No, for sure. So I guess the question now is, I mean, look, I don't know what new sanctions could be placed against Russia.
No.
I mean, like,
there are no new sanctions. You know, I was talking to a friend of mine yesterday about this vis-a-vis Iran. He asked me about sanctions, like what new sanctions could we put on Iran? The president is threatening new sanctions. And Forrest and Sebastian, you're absolutely right. Sanctions don't work. And I said, you know, when I went to the CIA, we were always threatening new sanctions on Iran. And I said, what possible sanctions are there left that would allow us to push the Iranians one way or another on an issue? There are no sanctions. So when I got to the CIA, I realized a sanction is, okay, there's this guy, Ted Rall, and he criticized us. So he is not allowed to open a checking account in any of our banks. That's a sanction. And it's also bullshit with a capital B. But that's where we've gotten with the Russians, with the Cubans, with the Chinese, with the Iranians, with the North Koreans. None of these sanctions mean anything. Yeah.
Well, I mean, so yeah, Pittsburgh dude is saying like, hey, Russia, you know, would have to invade all of Ukraine to stop it from joining NATO. Yeah. Although, you know, here's the thing is, if I was chatting with like President Putin, I would just remind him, and I'm sure he's well aware of this, in a way, this is kind of, the war kind of solves the problem because, you know, NATO's rules don't allow any nation with a disputed border to join NATO.
Good point.
Clearly, Ukraine has a disputed border.
Yeah.
Clearly. And so you could just stop hostilities right now. And in a way, you've already won that. And like, no, you're not going to get what, you know, denazification, and you're not going to get, you know, you might be able to say, and they're not going to get demilitarization, nor really should you ask for it. Because after all, you've already won a war.
Yeah.
I mean, like that, you've already proven that.
But then that leads me to conclude that now is the time for the Russians to negotiate their deal and get out. Now is the time.
Now it's a good time. Yeah. I think the Russians can cut a good deal with Trump. I mean, they can just say, look, what they said. Yeah, I mean, the terms are clear, right? Like, okay, so the Ukrainians, like their internal affairs are their internal affairs in terms of elections. You know, they want to have Stefan Bandera statues all over their country. That's on them, whatever. You know, they maybe have a DMZ, maybe like 20 miles along the Russian line of control. You freeze the conflict. Crimea is recognized as Russian now and forever. The Donbass is just a dotted line. It's disputed forever. Ukraine never tacitly admits that it's gone, but craves to have it back the way that China craves to have Taiwan back, but doesn't make a move to get it anytime soon, maybe hopefully never. And we all pick up our toys and go home, and Ukraine joins the EU, and then Russia has an EU trading partner right on its border, which it wants.
Yes.
And that's it. I mean,
yes.
It's a good deal. And Putin can credibly declare victory at that point.
Absolutely. Absolutely. He can say that he liberated the Donbass. He reclaimed Crimea. These ethnic Russians that were living in eastern Ukraine are now under Russian jurisdiction. That's a Russian victory. It's a Russian victory.
I mean, the war basically was hardly fought on Russian territory. It was in the Kursk region. I mean, it's kind of like shades of World War II, where it's like, oh, like the Germans took some of our land, as if only we didn't have. Too bad we don't have more of that.
Yeah,
no big deal, right? I mean, so, and I do think that the Ukrainians certainly can take pride in the fight that they fought. I mean, I think there's no shame in losing.
No,
I do think they lost. You know, it's like in a war, there's two sides, usually. One side wins, one side loses. does not mean that both sides didn't fight valiantly.
Mm-hmm.
The Ukrainians fought well. I mean, they just weren't going to beat the Russians.
Right. Yeah, they're too big, too strong.
All right.
Yeah.
So, all right, we'll keep watching that. And then I guess finally, this story, I had a feeling, I'm guessing that you would find this interesting. So if you're a student of history, or you spend a lot of time in libraries where there's in the history section, you will sometimes see a row of military histories that all have this red binding, and they're very like old-fashioned. They all look identical. They look like a series, and they're basically official U.S. military histories that go do a really deep dive using access to classified information, or that's recently declassified and basically for people who don't know, the U.S. military hires these top-notch historians to basically get the true, detailed, granular military, political, and social and cultural basis, but mostly the emphasis is on the military movements of every war. Every conflict, some that are very like obscure that we don't think much about, and they're incredible resources for historians and students of history. And Donald Trump, as part of the DOGE stuff, just issued a blanket firing of all of these military historians. And there's fear that this is part of some kind of conspiracy to rewrite military history, but I think it's probably something derpier than that. I think Donald Trump didn't know who these people were or what they did. He's never laid his eyes on one of these big red books in his life. And if he did, he'd be it's like if you read the CIA fact book, it's like, this is really good info. It's really solid. It's really intelligent. And these histories, no one else can do them. I mean, even if they're at Harvard or Yale or whatever, this is just it's a unique resource. I mean, I don't know. It's sad when you have someone who's an ignoramus.
Yes,
and it's Trump himself or people working for him and making budget cutting decisions.
The whole point of this group is to provide unbiased historical accounts that we can learn from later. Sorry, the building across from me is either on fire or the fire department thinks that it's on fire. I hope you can't hear all that activity.
It's probably a lot louder for you. I just heard a little fire truck honk.
But yeah, we need historians. There was a guy who replaced me in my first analytic position who went on to become the CIA historian, the actual historian. And that job sounds like a job for eggheads. It's actually a really important position. We need these people who have historical memories so that we can learn from the mistakes that we've made in the past. And I think you're right, Ted. Trump is like, what? Who? We have a bunch of people just sitting there rating histories. They're fired. They're all fired. Escort them out.
Yeah.
And they'll be back.
Even got that far, right?
They'll be back because of the Civil Service Act. You can't just fire people. You can't do it. So they'll be back.
And the thing is, they really do. I mean, it's hard to believe because you and I both know all the propaganda that comes out of the military and out of the U.S. government. But that said, they do a good job of doing unbiased histories.
They do.
They really do.
Yes.
And, and it's actually amazing. Like, they really, truly will be ruthless about mistakes that were made and say who made them. And
that's right.
Amazing source of original, of firsthand accounts, original primary data and primary sources. Indeed. So, I'm just kind of like, I just want them to come back. Now, are these guys official? Are these historians employees?
Yeah, they're civil servants on the GS scale. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
And there are a bunch of them at the Library of Congress too. They're what used to be called super grades. So the GS scale ends at 15, and once you hit 15, it's the top level, and then you can be promoted into the senior executive service. So these guys are what are called super grades. They're GS 16, 17, and 18. So they're not supervisory in any way, but they're, the smartest of the smart who can write these deep thoughts.
And
Ted, are you going to the? I'm boycotting the parade. And I tell you what, we had a military parade. It was the Gulf War Victory Parade in the spring of 1991, and of course, I worked very hard during the Gulf War at the CIA, and I still boycotted it because I don't believe we should have military parades. Just philosophically, I don't think we should have them. I think they're awful. They're gross. They glorify, violence and murder. And
that's true.
Yeah. No, I'm boycotting.
The only reason I've seen a few military parades in like Uzbek and Kazakh, like Independence Day. And they have like a military, parade in like at the time Almaty and Tashkent.
Yes,
they were cool. So the part also because it's like former Soviet weaponry, which I find, I have nostalgia for from the Cold War, just looking at it. But of course, the thing is, it just doesn't seem fundamentally American. It's just not something that we do.
No,
it's not ideological. But on the other hand, I wonder, like, if we were to see all the weapons, would we think, oh, that's great, this is where our tax dollars are going? Or would we say, God, why are we wasting money on these expensive weapon systems?
Yeah, right. And you know what? I remember in the 91 parade, the tanks just destroyed the streets. It destroyed Constitution Avenue in Washington, and it had to be repaved. So it's not even worth it.
Yeah. That's true because people don't understand tank treads. So there were, I didn't know that. So I was adjacent. I told you I went to the DMV when we had the Gulf War Victory Parade here in New York, but it wasn't a military parade. It was a ticker tape parade down Broadway.
Ours was actually a military parade with hardware. Yeah. Wow. It was bad.
That's crazy. I guess I missed that somehow.
Everybody in the CIA was going to this thing, so I volunteered for weekend duty. I figured I might as well make a couple of $100. I was
when is it?
Anyway. It was in spring of 1991 is when that one was. This one Trump's talking about, I'm not 100% sure is going to take place because our friend and former colleague, Brian Becker, brilliantly will get up at 5 o'clock in the morning to be the first in line at the Department of the Interior to apply for parade permits for every one of the routes that could be used for a military parade. He single-handedly blocked Donald Trump's military parade in the first term.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
He got there when the window opened at 7 a.m. He had the forms already filled out. And he reserved Constitution Avenue, Pennsylvania Avenue, Connecticut Avenue, Independence Avenue. He reserved everything. And Trump had to cancel the military parade.
That's brilliant.
Yeah,
brilliant. I'd heard about this, about the posters of Trump on the side of government cabinet department buildings in D.C. But specifically, the Department of Agriculture has a giant, dictator type picture of Trump next to a dictator picture of Abe Lincoln.
Oh my God. I haven't seen that.
Abe Lincoln is not a friend of mine, but I know about Abe Lincoln, and you know what I'm going to say. What the hell? How is this being allowed? How is this okay? I don't know.
It's not okay. No.
Wow. Well,
I'm always exhausted at the end of these shows. Now I'm exhausted and I'm pissed off.
Sorry, I apologize. We could do, it would be fun just to do a completely pop culture, frivolous, TV show, what's on TV, White Lotus.
Right. My sister keeps telling me I have to watch it. I'll tell you, I would love to talk about the P. Diddy trial, but I'm afraid that our viewers are going to beat us up over it.
There's going to be more. So why don't we do P. Diddy next time?
Okay.
Because we're already running over an hour here. And,
yeah, we're over.
Always leave them wanting more. No, I'm interested in the P. Diddy thing. So I have takes that might be unusual. Oh, like someone's like, people are like, they're very divided. Yeah. And we'll all, and there's a request for Q&A. Hey, we always take the questions.
Oh, yeah. Just type the question in the chat. Definitely.
Yeah. I was joking about dictator Abe Lincoln, although kind of not really, because he did suspend habeas corpus. That's kind of a dictatorial move.
Yes.
And he kind of cheated in the 1864 election, too. So, kind of. Poor General McClellan. He didn't deserve that.
No, he didn't.
No,
he was the fall guy, but that's a whole different conversation.
He was the Washington Generals. Anyway. Yep. All right. Thanks everyone for tuning in. DeProgram will be back later this week. We're going to try to keep on this schedule for Wednesdays. We'll see if we can do that. So Wednesday at 5 p.m. Eastern, 2 p.m. on the West Coast. Keep it here. And we're probably going to try for Saturday.
We're going to do Saturday. Yeah.
Saturday at 12 noon Eastern, I think, is what we're going to try to do. Try to make that a regular schedule. Last Saturday's show went really well. So we're hoping that there's going to be more than that. We're going to post some clips, too, after the show. But thanks, everybody, for tuning in to DeProgram. Please hit like. Please subscribe. Please follow. And please share us on your socials. It literally is going to make or break whether we can keep doing this. But so far, things are moving in the right direction, so we just need to keep it going.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you so much. Take care.